Hi, environmental sociology students. Nice to see you again. I hope you had a nice weekend. This week's topic is going to be environmental justice and environmental injustice. I know that many of you entered this class wondering, how do we fit environment and sociology together? And this is demonstrated nowhere, I think, better than in examining environmental justice. Environmental justice is a movement that seeks to fix or solve environmental injustice. And environmental injustice is the belief that the goods and bads related to environment are distributed unevenly in society based on various factors, things like race and ethnicity, things like wealth and poverty, and even gender. Now, what do I mean by this? Because sometimes it's hard to reconcile. I think it is demonstrated best by the United Church of Christ's reports that your book discusses. And the United Church of Christ believed that environmental injustice was happening in the United States, and they put together a panel to examine that, to examine if it was true, if it was happening. And what they found in their very famous report was that African Americans and other minorities were 2 to 3 times more likely, and that's a lot, to live near landfills and hazardous waste in their communities. And that suggests a pattern, which is something that we look for in the social sciences, of environmental injustice. We see this in a lot of ways globally and also in the U.S., and we're going to talk about health this week. I think that's a really good way to look at how wealth and environment and poverty can interact and can kind of put forward injustices. So let's talk about a real example of this. You have to imagine certain scenarios that might affect people's health, and then think about how wealth or lack of it would affect that. A wealthier person, for example, can afford to work a cleaner job. What do I mean by a cleaner job? That sounds kind of strange. Certainly not my office, which is obviously not clean. But when I say a cleaner job, I'm talking about jobs that expose workers to fewer environmental toxins. People with an education, with some wealth behind them, can generally afford to choose careers and to find specific jobs that don't expose them to a lot of danger from those environmental factors at work. People who do not have as much money, poorer people, might not have that choice and might have to take a job. And those, can affect your health, your well-being, things like fertility. So that can be a really critical factor. In addition to working cleaner jobs, people who have more money can make healthier and arguably greener buying choices. They can buy better foods, healthier foods, organic foods. They can buy cleaning products that maybe have fewer toxins in them. They can buy non-allergic products, even things like sofas or mattresses with less flame retardants and other possibly harmful chemicals in them. So money can be a definite factor related to health there. In addition, think about neighborhood. People with more wealth can afford to live in a safer neighborhood in terms of crime, but also in terms of environmental factors as well. They can afford to live farther away from that landfill. In addition, they can choose neighborhoods that have less noise pollution, in addition to regular pollution, particulate matter, and things like that. So even neighborhood choice can make a difference, and that's above and beyond some of the more obvious issues, things like access to health care. There's also access to safer transport, and transport that's better for the environment. So a greener car, having a safer car, a newer model with all of the safety features. So in all of these areas, we can see how seemingly disparate issues that don't look like they have that much in common, like environment, wealth, health, and poverty, are really very closely intertwined. And that's where we find, in the United States and globally, an awful lot of injustice. And we'll be looking at some case studies of environmental injustice, from the Ojibwe people to Bhopal. So please read those case studies in your book and think a little bit about this question of environmental justice. Where do we find it, and where do we not find it today? The grassroots movement is trying to make a difference in many communities throughout the United States and globally to seek environmental justice and to equalize environmental goods and bads, environmental costs and benefits between people of different income levels. See you next week.